Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Jack's Corner. I'm Tarzan Banana, and with me, as always, is our founder, Jack Figgle. Jack, how you doing today?
Great, Tarzan. Christ is risen.
Indeed, he is risen. So
one last time this week as we wrap up the Paschal season with Ascension on Thursday, and then 10 days after that we hit Pentecost. So we're moving along in the liturgical calendar of the East and the Catholic East.
Yes. And well, speaking of what?
I was going to say, which, by the way, may be changing significantly next year and the year after. Well, will change next year, but the year after. The date of Easter has been a issue between East and West, and this year we're as far apart as we can get, 5 weeks difference. The Orthodox just had Easter yesterday, May 5th, and we're getting ready to have Ascension. But next year, 2025, they coincide.
Yes.
And there's talk of coming up to an agreement to have them coincide from there going forward.
That would be a blessing.
Yep, indeed. So we're all praying hard for that.
Yes.
So we're going to go back and in time a little bit to the first Light of the East pilgrimage in 2014.
Yes.
So this was part of a larger event. I just mentioned the Light of the East. It was number one, the first ecumenical pilgrimage that I led. And if you remember, during this same pilgrimage that we spoke about several weeks ago, we also went and had a private audience with Pope Francis.
Yes.
On the same trip with the same group. So this was a few days after seeing Pope Francis that we then went to see Patriarch Bartholomew. We had about 40 people in our group, and our spiritual director was Metropolitan Callistos. Oh, blessed memory.
Good old Callistos.
Yep. So it's kind of heartwarming to go back and think about that trip and him being with us. The patriarchal office is called the Phanar. It's essentially about a 4 to 5 square block area in the Fener, which is how they get the name Fener district of Istanbul, right near the Golden Horn. And there's essentially the cathedral and the main office building and a couple other ancillary buildings. So, and you can't walk into the central gate. I don't know if I've mentioned that on any previous of our visits to Constantinople, but the gates to the patriarchal complex have been locked shut since the 18th century when a patriarch was hung by the Turks from that gate and killed. Wow. And ever since then, they've closed the gates. And so you go through a little side entrance to actually get into the compound. I mentioned that only because I think a few days ago was the anniversary of that hanging. And so there were Facebook video clips of the patriarch having a memorial service at the gate in honor of that. So we went to Istanbul with our group of 40 people, with Callistos as our leader, and went into the Phanar, up the steps to the second floor to the large audience room. And when I say large, I mean 50 or 60 people filled the room, as opposed to at the Vatican, the audience room, other than St. Paul or St. Peter's itself, St. Paul Hall, where they hold 3,000 to 5,000. This is 50 or 60 is the most you can get there. And we had about 40. So they had chairs all in a big horseshoe around the perimeter. And the patriarch walked in and simply said, "Good afternoon," in a nice deep bass voice. And we said good afternoon back to him. And he was very informal. He did not have prepared remarks. And so he stood in front of us with his walking stick, bastoni, called in Slavonic, that he carries, that is a sign of his office as patriarch. And he stood in front of us and spoke for, about 10 minutes off the cuff, talking about the status of ecumenical relations and where things stood with the dialogue. At the time, I think there was a controversy brewing with Antioch and Jerusalem over a little parish in Abu Dhabi. They were fighting over who got that piece of the desert. And that was sort of occupying the patriarch's mind at the time. But we had a very, very nice visit with him. At the end of his remarks, Metropolitan Callistos sort of started the action, if you will, by explaining to him who we were as a group, why we were there. He commented to the patriarch, I remember, saying that we had just been to see the Pope and that we had visited Rome. And his response was, and I think this goes to show how much he enjoyed our visit and how informal we've become over the years. He said to us, yes, all roads lead to Rome.
No.
But he said it in jest. So it was he had a nice sort of smile on his face as he said it, as if Eddie was making a joke of it. Tell us. Go ahead.
I was gonna just point out, like, yes, he was making a joke because you're informal, but I could just imagine how, if there weren't people who realized he was joking around, how they would feel that. It's just like, yep. Rome is the end goal.
Yep. Yeah. So Metropolitan Callistos then continued on introducing us, and I remember the phrase that I enjoyed hearing the most and stuck with me. This is now 10 years ago, because this took place in 2014. He said, yes, to the patriarch, he said, we are a group of 40 pilgrims that we have come here to venerate the saints and to pray together. And he said, of the 40 of us, 25% are Eastern Orthodox, 25% are Roman Catholic, and 50% of our group are Eastern Rite Catholics. And the patriarch turned to me, who was at the other end of the horseshoe from where Metropolitan Callistos was at the two bookends of this half circle that we made. The patriarch turns to me and again jokingly says, yes, so this time you have the majority.
Yes, I believe we were talking once and you brought that line up. That's...
Yeah, that has stuck with me, I think we're probably the only group that comes to visit him where most of the group are Eastern Rite Catholics.
The word there is Catholic. That's the funny bit of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think with the different groups and all my different visits with him, I've demonstrated to him that Eastern Rite Catholics are not out to steal Orthodox away, and that we are just as Orthodox as the next Orthodox in our practice and in our traditions. And I think he's learned to appreciate and understand us a lot better from our interactions over the now approaching 30 years since I first met him. So anyway, it was a nice remembrance from that encounter when he said that. So after we were Metropolitan Callistos finished his remarks, I then had two presentations to make to him. And as he quips occasionally when we walk in or I walk in, he said, yes, Mr. Jack, the book publisher, is here with another gift of a book that I'll never have time to read. And sure enough, I did have a white leather-bound edition of the Byzantine Catholic liturgy of St. John Chrysostom in Spanish, because that's what we gave the Pope earlier in the week. And I made 2 of them so that, they each got one. I also, at the papal audience, had given him a small shelf size icon of Peter and Andrew that we had commissioned. And so I had a second one that we also gave to Bartholomew. So we gave the Pope and the Patriarch the exact same gifts to keep everything on an equilibrium.
Does Patriarch Bartholomew even speak Spanish?
Well, that was his quip. He looked at it and saw the Spanish, and he commented, he said, very good for the Pope, but I don't know Spanish.
Well, I don't know German, but I've got a German New Testament, so...
There you go. So he didn't take much interest in the book, but he did take the icon of Peter and Andrew and turn it over, and indeed, the iconographer had written a greeting to him in Greek with her paintbrush that he read and translated for us as just, prayerful blessings to His All Holiness and so forth and the date. So he knew what he was doing. He turned it over and was very appreciative. He kissed it, venerated it, because it was the icon of Peter and Andrew. And so it was a special sort of pair of gifts that we gave him. And I said to him as I gave him the icon that we designed them and had them commissioned as a pair, and they were on thick enough wood that they would stand by themselves if you put them like on a bookshelf. And so I said, we gave one to the Pope, and we're giving one to you, identical of your 2 brothers. We hope that you might put this in a private place on your desk or in a bookshelf in your residence, that every time you see it, you would say a little prayer for your brother. And likewise, we said the same to the Pope, that when he saw the icon, he would say a little prayer for his brother, the Patriarch.
I talk to a lot of people who aren't Catholic or Orthodox, and I was sharing with them how St. Andrew is for the East as Peter is for the West, and why the Peter and Andrew embracing themselves is the icon for ecumenism.
Right.
And whenever I share that, they're like face drop, like, what? That makes so much sense. If you're claiming that you guys have very similar beliefs, that it would make sense that if Peter is the Pope, Andrew would be for the East. And it's funny every time I bring that up, because then they're like, that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah. As a historian, I just recently read that Callistus quoted, he said, one of his history professors at Oxford used to say, it all ties up in the end. It all makes sense. And so, having Peter and Andrew embracing, and that icon was first written for the embrace of Athenagoras and Paul VI when they met in Jerusalem in the 1960s and lifted the anathemas of 1054 and officially removed the legal excommunications that had been put in place at the major schism in 1054. So that icon has modern significance of I think it was 1964 that they met. Just at the height of Vatican II is when they first met and lifted the anathemas. So
some point in the 60s.
Yeah. So I gave him the icon in the book, and he was very, very grateful and so forth. And then I went to sit down, and he said, wait a minute, I have something for you. And I stopped in my tracks and turned around with a smile on my face, thinking, oh my goodness, this is the first time this was the first time I brought such a big group to him. First time he's gone out of his way to get me something, which I found very, very special. And he gave me a medallion that had been designed and minted, so to speak, made of bronze, that had on one side the image of Athenagoras and Paul VI meeting in Jerusalem, and then the flip side was the image of him and Francis meeting in Jerusalem which had just taken place earlier that year, for the anniversary of the lifting of the anathemas, and he gave it to me as a remembrance of our visit.
That is the coolest thing.
Yeah, I have it here on my knickknack shelf of special gifts that I've received through the years, and so that was part of that audience in 2014, and again, a very, very special remembrance. After we exchanged the gifts and did all that, we pretty much concluded our business. And we'd already spent 25 minutes with His All Holiness. So we gathered around him up on the dais in the audience room for the group photo that we always like to take, and we have it for our memory. But then as the photographers were finished clicking their shutters, because with lighting conditions and improved lenses, you don't have flash bulbs anymore. But as they finished taking all the group pictures, Father Tom Loya, who was one of the persons who were on the trip with us. Oh, by the way, when Father Loya went through the line to get a brochure and a little booklet from the Patriarch, as everyone did, everyone went up and got a blessing and a little giveaway. And it was a booklet about the return of the relics of St. John Chrysostom that had come from Rome back to Constantinople. So when Father Tom went up to greet the Patriarch, I have a famous picture now where the Patriarch looks at him and puts his hand in the air as far as he could reach, and he still could not reach the top of Father Tom's head. The Patriarch is a bit on the short side, maybe only about 5'3" or 5'4", and Father Tom is 6'4", and so the Patriarch put his hand up in the air and just to jokingly comment how tall Father Tom was. Again, the Patriarch, I think, was having a very good time greeting each of us and having us visit. So when our group photos were over, Father Tom intoned the line that the priest uses to sing "God grant you many years" to the Patriarch. And so we as a group, since most of us were Eastern Rite Catholic and most of those were Ruthenians, we all knew the melody. And since a lot of us were Slavs, we also knew it in Church Slavonic. So when he sang "God grant you many years" in English, and then we sang "Baha Elita" in Church Slavonic, and the Patriarch gave us his blessing. But then as he left the room, he said to us all, "I still prefer it in Greek." So even his departing combat was a bit of a joke, and so forth. So I think he enjoyed himself compared to many of the other kinds of audiences that he has with, world leaders and church figures that are arguing about this, that, and the other thing. And of course, back in those days, everything was a lot more pleasant within Orthodoxy than compared to today, because this was all pre the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and this was before Patriarch Bartholomew received half of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine into his patriarchate that had been schismatic for the last 50, 60 years, which caused some tension between Moscow and Constantinople. So this is all before then, when things were still on very good footing and everyone was in communion with each other, which is not the case today. So it was a much more pleasant time, and it's been enjoyable thinking about those times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and Patriarch Bartholomew are more like friends than just business partners in a way. And
oh yeah.
So, I mean, just like it said, the best way for this move, for any type of ecumenical movement, is to have friends on the other side. And so I think it just shows it throughout the story. You mentioned two jokes, but like they were both said by him in jest to you about all of that, and it shows. And I'm over here laughing about it. So I wish tensions were a little bit less, but it all, God's will be done.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm more optimistic now, actually, than I was back then about unity happening before 1,000-year schism. In other words, before 2054, which was a theme of Oriental Lumen Conference about 15 years ago, was, can we have unity before 2054? And Callistos' answer at the time was, it's all in God's hands. We cannot predict how long it will take. But I'm more optimistic given the agreed statements that have come out in the last 10 to 15 years about privacy and conciliarity and how they must balance, and the notion that there is a universal church over which the Pope has pastoral responsibilities that has been agreed to by the Orthodox, and the Catholic side has agreed that there is a regional primacy for things like patriarchs and regional synods that the Catholic Church is heading towards with, the synod on synods as to how to govern the church on a regional basis rather than everything centralized in Rome. And so I think that's an influence that's affecting in both directions, where the two lungs of the church are learning from each other. And I'm, as I said, on that front, I'm more optimistic now than I was when I started all this 25 years ago. Things have really, really progressed. And in fact, the issue of primacy was the one thing that Metropolitan Callistos said was the only thing holding up unity. All the other issues that people bring up can be explained away as either theological opinions or simply practices of faith of this group versus that group.
Yeah.
So, in spite of worldwide political tensions being a lot worse, I believe on an ecumenical front, we're getting closer and closer. And as Callistos once said of telling the story that church unity is like a wagon wheel, as you get closer and closer together, you get closer to each other as you approach the wagon wheel. But also as you get closer and closer to unity, everyone gets more and more animated and afraid of what is happening. And so the closer you get, the harder it is to get even closer.
Yeah. I mean, the devil doesn't want it, so it makes all the sense in the world. And I mean, even with the primacy thing, like that's what the conference is on this year, is those agreed upon statements. So I think it'll, again, all in God's hands, and God's will be done. But I think if I were to speak of what I see, I think the fact that all this political turmoil and the way the world is going nuts is just showing that God is working behind the scenes to make something even better. Because I mean, like, even the younger generations are leaning more traditional, like the more traditional forms of Catholicism, more traditional forms of Orthodoxy. I think it'll happen. And unlike the rapture that Protestants have, I do hope this happens in my life.
Yeah. Well, I even am so optimistic that I'm hopeful it happens within my lifetime. And that's only another 20 years or so. So I keep telling everybody that listen, we've got to hurry up.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, it's been great reminiscing about that trip. And next time we'll go on to the next audience that I recall with Bartholomew. That was Light of the East, pilgrimage number 2.
All right.
For next time.
Yes. All right. Well, since that concludes everything, thank you all for coming to this episode of Jack's Corner. Again, thank you, and we'll see you next week. That's all. God bless, and goodbye. All right.